Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in this video we're going to be adding some collectible food items to our game so that our character can increase their score. So, let's get started. I realized that I actually have a mistake with my player movement. So my player moves when I press any of the arrow keys, it changes the direction. But if I press any other key, my player stops. So before we add food, I just want to fix this really quickly. So I'm going to go to the JavaScript file, and it looks like this error is coming from my update player function. Let me make this a little bit larger too. All right, so here we go. When we're updating the player, it looks like, let's see. Oh no, it's not coming from the player function. It's coming from the event listener for the key down. Okay, so it looks like no matter what key is pressed down, the first thing that we're doing is we're stopping the motion in the X and Y direction before the arrow key sets them to the proper motion. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this out because I don't want to stop the motion for any key. I really only want to stop the motion for the arrow keys. So when I took that out, I used Command X to cut it, and I'm going to paste this into each of the spots here. So let me do a multi-cursor here. So I'm going to hold down Command and press, no, it doesn't do a multi-cursor. Is it Control? Okay, I don't know how to do the multi-cursor on this, so I'm going to skip that. And I'm just going to copy and paste this, into each of these if statements. And the reason why we're doing that is each time we press an arrow key, we'll stop the motion before we recalibrate it to the proper motion. But now it won't stop for other keys. So let me do a refresh here. So now my character, even if I press the space bar or any of the other keys on the keyboard, doesn't stop, but still the arrow keys work. Okay, great. All right, so let's get started with adding some food to our game. So I'm going to create a function called draw food, and I'm going to model it similarly off of this player function. So I'm going to have in my mind, let me keep my player functions together, and I'll go here. Oh my gosh, I don't know why sometimes when I'm doing this on the video, the lag really messes up my typing. All right, so for food here, we're going to create a function called draw food. So thinking about this function, we're going to have to know some information about the food that we're drawing. So I'm going to make the draw food function, since it requires that information, require an input called food info. And so we're going to think about food info similar to how we thought about our player info up here. So here our player had X, Y, X speeds, and Y speeds. I'm thinking that for the food, I might keep things even simpler as a model for what food info might look like. It might look like just X and Y coordinates, because I'm thinking it won't move. If you want your food to move, you could have speed X and speed Y parts. But because the food isn't moving for me, I'm going to keep it just having X and Y coordinates. All right, so when we draw the food, what we're going to do is I'm just going to place a red circle, like an apple or something, for our character to eat. So let's see. In order to draw a circle, we can make use of some copying and pasting up here. This looks like a circle. So I'll paste that in here. I'm going to change it so that the food is just red. Then we begin a path. Instead of placing the food at the player info, I'm going to place the X coordinate. I'm deleting the plus 16 as well, so that the first part here is just the X coordinate for the center of the circle. The X coordinate for the center of the circle will be the 0th item in the food info list that we're inputting. The Y coordinate will be 0, 1, the first item from that list. For the radius, currently this is the radius of the red part of the eye. I would like the food to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to make it maybe 25 to start. And I'm going to do a full circle, so the start angle 0 to end angle 2 pi is a full circle. All right, that looks pretty good. So let me just do a test here, and I'm going to add, in addition to drawing the player and updating the player, I'm going to add draw food, and I'm going to make up some x and y, draw food, and I'm going to make up some x and y coordinates here. I'm just going to use the center of the grid to see if that works. So we're going to draw food at 400, 300. Sweet. Okay, so our food works there. All right, let's see. So when our player goes over the food, we want our player to eat the food. I don't think we're quite ready for that yet. Let's see. I'm imagining that we might have more than one food item at a time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a list with different food infos in it. So let's do that. Let foods equal, and this is going to be a list that contains different foods. So I'm going to put one food at the center, and I'm going to put one food over here maybe at 100, 200. Oops, that should go in the second set of parentheses here. So this could be a little bit tricky to understand, but foods is a list, so these first and last square brackets are the group of foods. And it contains two lists inside of it. So here's the first food info, x and y coordinates of the first food, x and y coordinates of the second food. So here's where things are going to change a little bit in our set interval function. Instead of drawing the food at this specific value, we really want to draw each of these food items. And there might be like hundreds of these. So the easiest way to do that is to say foods dot for each. And what that will do is it will go into this foods list, and for each of the groups in this food list, we can program it to do something. So what we'll say is go into the foods list for each of them, a name for each of these, since they provide info about a food, would be food info. So take the food info that we're currently on, and then what we want to do with our food info is we want to draw it. So draw food for the current food info that we're on. So we're saying go through this. For this food info, draw the food. For this food info, draw the food. And so now what we should do is we should get two food infos, or not two food infos, two foods where they are, which looks pretty good. All right. So let's see. I'd also like the ability to create a new piece of food. So let's create a function to create food. This one's not going to require any extra information. However, thinking about how we're going to create food, I'm thinking that we'll need to maybe place the food in a random location. So this will be a good opportunity to go to the toolbox and grab the procedure, generate random, like we often do. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it at the top of my JavaScript file. And what that will let us do is it will let us use this generate random command anywhere where we want it to. So to create a food item, it looks like it's generating this information, which is a random x and random y coordinate. So I'll say let x equal generate random. Oops, generate random, for some reason I've coded as underscore, I believe. Let me just check that out. Yeah, it's underscore. Okay, and we're going to generate a random number for x from 0 to 800. Let y equal generate random from 0 to 600. And then this new food info, let new food info equal, it's a combination of those x and y coordinates. And we want to add this food info onto our foods list. So to do that, we'll say foods dot push, I think, new food info. And what that should do is it should add onto this using this push method. It should push into this list the new food that was generated randomly. So let's see if that works. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to open up the JavaScript console. Okay, it's super slow because of the video. And let's refresh the screen here. And I'm just going to type over here, create food. That doesn't require any input parameters, so I'm just putting it like that. And now it creates a random food. And if we keep pressing the up arrow, it will allow us to keep creating food items randomly. So that looks pretty good. All right, so we've got some big pieces. We're drawing the food, we're creating the food. Let's see. What do we want to do if we eat the food? Well, to see if we eat the food, we can make use of some math. So what does it mean to eat the food? It basically means that we get close enough to the food so that it looks like we're eating it. So we're going to need some math in order to do this. To tell if we're close enough, we need to use either, you can think about it as the Pythagorean Theorem, which would be based on the x and y distances. You can calculate the hypotenuse, the distance diagonally between the two. Or you can think about it like the distance formula between 2 points. So I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but if you have two x and y coordinates in the coordinate plane, the distance between them can be found like this. And it's actually identical to the Pythagorean theorem. You've got the x distance squared, the y distance squared, equals the diagonal distance, the hypotenuse squared. And then to solve for the diagonal distance, you just square root both sides. All right, so we're going to program this function in so we don't have to do any math. The computer will do the math for us. So we'll do a function here, distance. So when we calculate the distance, we'll have to input an x1, a y1, an x2, and a y2, which will be the x and y coordinates of the points. So let's see. To calculate the distance, we're just going to make use of this distance formula. We'll say I'm going to change the name of this actually to get distance. I'm going to say let distance equal. And I'm just typing in this formula here. Math.square root. Then to do the squares, I'll do x2 minus x1 in parentheses there. To do a power in JavaScript, I think it's star star. It's not multiplication, it's like to the second power, plus y2 minus y1 squared. All right, so we're taking the square root of this thing squared plus this thing squared. All right, that looks pretty good. And then after we get the distance, we want to output this distance from the function. So we're going to return the distance. What return does is basically, when we're inside of a function, this variable only exists as we're doing the function, as we're running it. This next part here is going to output the distance when we run it. Okay, so I think this should be getting the distance. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to do a refresh here, and I'm going to get the distance between these 2 points. So I'm going to get the distance, and then in order to get this distance, it's going to be go into the foods list, get the first food. This is too complicated actually looking as a test for this. Let me see. I'll say let food1 equal foods. So this will give us the first food, which should be that one here in the middle. Okay, cool. Let food2 equal go into the foods list and grab the 1th item, which should be this one here. So food2. Awesome. And I want to find the distance in between these. It might not be a nice number, but let's do it. So let's get the distance. And the way this works is we have to take the x and y coordinates from here. So it'll be food 1, x is the 0th, food 1, 1 is the y. So we've done x1 and y1, which are the x and y coordinates of food 1. Now we'll do the x2 and y2 values, which are the x and y coordinates of food 2. So food 2, 0, and food 2, 1. And you don't have to type this in. I just want to check to make sure it works. So it's telling me that the distance between these two is 316 pixels. Does that make sense? Let's see. Well, the x distance here is 300. So it should be a little bit more than the x distance here because it's diagonal. I think 316 is reasonable. So I feel confident that my get distance function is working. All right, so let's see. What else do we want to do with this information? Well, what we want to do is, as we're playing the game, we want to check the distance between the player and the food for each food. So what we can do here is we can say foods dot for each, draw the food. If actually I'm going to do too much in that line of code. Let's see. Let's say let the distance equal get the distance between the player and the food. So we're going to use the player's x and y values, which is player info 0, because that's the x coordinate for the player. Player info 1, because that's the y coordinate for the player. And then we'll use the x and y values for x2 and y2 from the food that we're currently on. So food info 0 and food info 1. So this will give us the distance between the player and the food. So every frame, we're going to calculate the distance between the player and the food for every food item on the screen. And then what we can say is, if this distance that we just found is less than the combined radius of the player and the food, it will look like the player is on top of the food. So if this distance is less than, let's see, the food radius is 25. So if this distance is less than 25 plus, and I'm going to put this in parentheses just to say that I want to compute this side first. Let me see. And the player radius is, for the yellow circle, 40. Actually, you know what? I'll just compute that here. So if it's less than 65, because 40 plus 25 is 65, then maybe what we'll do is we'll just check to see if it's working. We'll do a console.log yum. And then I want to do a console.log for the food info that we're currently eating. So let's refresh it. And now, let's see. Okay, because they're starting in the same position, we're getting a lot of information right away. I'm going to start this food off a little bit different. I'm going to start it off at 500, 300. Let's see if... Okay, and then when we get to the food over here, it should give us some information that we're eating that food, and now we're eating this food. All right, so things are looking pretty good here. I think we've got pretty good start here with eating the food. Let's see how we can actually make the food disappear now and create a new food item when we eat it. So to make the food disappear, I'm just going to scroll down so that I don't keep eating that food. So to make the food disappear, let's see. We need to remove this food, basically, from our list up here. So when we eat the food, we want to remove it from the list. So to remove something from a list, I think we're going to use a function called splice in JavaScript. I'm not too familiar with this part of JavaScript. Let's see if this works. Oh, I think I really want slice. Nope. I think I wanted splice. All right, let's see. My fish is this. Okay, here we go. So to remove an element, we can use this function. So this will remove one element at index 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and it will remove one element from that list. So then you'll see that my fish gets changed here. All right. So what we need to do is we need to keep track of which food item we're currently looking at. So let me create a variable here, which will be food count. And we're going to start that off at 0. Now, food count. Every time we go through this for each loop, we're going to increase the food count by 1 at the end, because we'll be looking at, no, sorry, not let. We'll say food count equals the old value of food count plus 1, because we start off looking at the 0th food info, and then we look at the first food info, and then we look at the second. So every time through, we look at the next one. So what I'm going to say here is if the distance is less than 65, we want to remove the item that's at the current food count. So we'll do okay, it looks like it changes the array in place. So we'll do foods dot splice, and I'm just taking this from here. The one that we want to remove is the one that's at the current food count position, and we only want to remove one food. So let's see if this works to remove food. Oh, we ate it. Cool, awesome. And let's see if we can eat this one here too. Oh, sick. Okay, so we're eating the food. That's awesome. All right, so let's see. I'm going to give myself a little bit more room with that first food because it's happening. We're eating that food really quickly. So I'm going to change that to 700, 300. Now, the last part about creating a new piece of food to me would be let's delete these console.logs that we're using to check things. And let's create a new food every time we eat a food. So let's see. We'll say every time we eat a food, we'll create a new food. And we can just run our create food function, which does these 4 lines of code to make food. All right, so let's see if this works. So now I can go around and every food that I eat, it replaces. Let me see. I feel like something is weird was happening. Let's just make sure. Okay. Okay, no, everything is good. It just redrawing the food. Okay, perfect. So we've got a guy that goes around eating food. In our next video, we're going to probably update the score so that we can update the score. And we'll also add some bad guys so that we can run around from the bad guys. I think the last thing here is that we don't always want to start with the food in these positions. Or maybe we do. But if you don't want to start with the food in these positions, what you can do is you can go in here and you can say that foods should start off as an empty list with nothing in it. And then what you can do is we can use the function create food as many times as we want to generate the first few pieces of food. So maybe we want the game to have 3 pieces of food. So here we go. We've got 3 pieces of food now randomly generated, and every time we refresh it, they'll be in different places. So there's still a lot of work for us to do, but this is a long video already. It's tricky work making a game, but I'll see you guys in class, and hopefully I can help you debug any errors that you get and figure out how to implement any ideas, like maybe moving food or other ideas that you have. Bye.